One of the nicest rewards of being a garden designer is visiting the gardens that I've designed in the past. The greatest pleasure in that for me is to see the growth of the plants and trees. For instance, 8 years ago I planted this sugar maple. When I planted it, it was only my height, and now just look at how much it's grown in its beautiful autumn glory. Since trees are all around us, we may often take them for granted. But today, we're going to focus on trees as we travel from coast to coast. Trees are certainly the giants of the plant kingdom. They house and feed us and offer a shade from the sun. I can't imagine a world without them. Some of us consider them a form of art and collect trees just as painting and sculpture are collected. One man spent his life creating such things that collections are made of. Axel Erlandsson is responsible for these strangely beautiful pieces of art known as circus trees. I had a chance to visit with his daughter, WILMA Erlandsson, and she shared some of her memories about her father. What was the inspiration behind the circus trees for your father?
Well, actually, he saw some natural grafts, and he decided to try and see what he could do along that line. Well, he started working on them probably a year or two before I was born, and we lived in the San Joaquin Valley, near a little community called Hilmar. And he worked on them about 20 years there, I guess, before he sold it in 1946 and moved to Santa Cruz. And he moved several of the trees over to Santa Cruz. They were big trees, and they were not moved in boxes like they do these days. The roots were cut and the tops were cut, and they were wrapped in burlap and peat moss, I believe, and brought over on trucks. There were about at least two or three loads of them that came over. I was younger. I was a little interested in trying to do something with them, but he never really wanted to tell me how to do it because he was afraid I would tell somebody. So I didn't learn the trick. People would ask him about it, but he didn't tell them how to do the trees.
Yeah.
He used to tell children that came to the park sometimes, he would tell them that he talked to the trees.
Really? Unfortunately, Axel took the secrets of the circus trees with him when he died. But thanks to one man, the trees are still surviving today. Michael Bonfante, owner and founder of Bonfante Gardens, is well known and respected in the world of tree moving.
Well, in the early 80s, we got into the nursery business kind of as a fluke, but in the course of doing that, I developed a real passion for trees. And then as time passed, the opportunity in '83 to acquire these trees came to light, and we thought it would be a real tool for us to share our passion for trees and use this as a focal point because they had a tremendous amount of interest to the public. So we fortunately, in several years it took us to acquire these trees, learned how to dig big trees ourselves, and we went over and took plenty of time, took 2 years to dig these trees, and we dug them out and coordinated the effort to get them to Gilroy. The biggest problem of moving big trees is not the digging of the tree, but it's getting it down the road. You have limitations of 16-foot bridges or power lines, or whatever it might be.
How did this artist go about creating these fantastic shapes?
Well, Axel Erlandsson started playing around with trees in about 1927. He was really a self-taught surveyor by trade, but had this uncanny desire to play around with trees, and he, through a process of grafting and pleaching, as the basis that we can understand that he did it, and then a lot of secret techniques that he developed that he never shared with anybody to create these special trees. And he did that and had many special designs. This group of sycamores is one of his, I think, mid-span developments, and he had developed some skills that he thought would allow him to put multiple trees on a multiple plane and create all these different connections. And he didn't have as much success as he had later on, because the tree after this he did was much more precise and accurate, and I believe that he learned things by doing what he did to this tree, or this group of trees, to be able to apply it to the next tree that he did.
So he had to learn these techniques along the way. There was no manual for him to follow.
No, absolutely not. It was just a God-given inner talent that he had developed, and the skills he learned from surveying only gave him ideas and ability to create forms to try to shape the trees in the shape that he wanted them. But the actual biological processes that he developed were absolutely self-taught and from an experimental basis.
When I heard that Michael Bonfante had taken an interest in them, I was really glad, because I knew he would take good care of them. He was experienced in that type of work with trees, and I just knew it would be really good, that they would be taken care of, and they are.
The trees are now residing at the theme park created by Bonfante Gardens in Gilroy, California, standing as a living tribute to a visionary artist and horticulturist. The peach is undoubtedly one of those delicious signatures of summer, and they don't get much fresher than this, just picking them from the trees. In this orchard alone, there are over 14 varieties, each with its own subtle characteristics of flavor, color, and texture. But of course, peaches are divided into two distinct categories, cling and freestone. You see, these terms refer to whether the seed or the stone actually tears away from the flesh of the peach. For instance, take a look at this fire print. You can see how easily the flesh tears away from the stone. That's why it's called a freestone. The flesh of the cling peaches, on the other hand, clings to the stone. Now, the difference in these categories of peaches goes beyond this. Whether they're cling or freestone has a bearing on the flesh. You'll find even canned peaches will indicate the category on their label. Let's take a look at the cling varieties first. They tend to ripen earlier in the season. They're some of the first peaches you'll find in the market, and their flesh is generally firmer. Now, the freestones, on the other hand, ripen later, and they tend to be softer and juicier. They're easy to use in cooking, and to peel and slice them is a snap. While most of the peaches we eat today are grown by large commercial growers, some small orchardists, like Larry and Pat High, offer 15 varieties of this delicious fruit throughout the season.
This variety here is called Fire Prince, and you can see it's got a good load of peaches on it.
Beautiful.
And we'll be picking these in the next few days. You know, they're ripe now and they're ready for picking, from the Red Havens and early Reds on through to the Albertas and past and Jeffersons. Those have been on the tree a long time. The Crest Havens and Lorings and Fire Prince, those are all real good peaches. And those are real good flavored for canning or freezing. The first ones that get ripe are out on the ends of the limb like this. And what you look for is fullness and color. Make sure there's no green around the stem. Right. If you've got good color and fullness, it'll probably be ripe.
To me, there's nothing better than the taste of these fresh peaches, grown locally and in season. So remember to support your local farmers by purchasing their homegrown produce. A trend among chefs and restaurants across the country is to use the freshest produce possible when it's in season. This can produce some creative results. For instance, while many of us love that old-fashioned dessert strawberry shortcake, here at Trios, owner Cappy Peck Peterson extends the idea into the peach season, and it all starts with our homemade shortcake.
We made 24 discs, and for this quantity you'll need 4 cups of flour, 1.5 pounds of very cold unsalted butter cut into small pieces, a half a cup of ice cold water, and a half a teaspoon of salt. We make it in the mixer with a paddle attachment. You don't want to over mix it. It's a little bit like pie crust, maybe a little stickier, and you can't roll it out, it's too fragile. We just pat it out by hand, spray the baking sheet with a little bit of food release, and bake it in a low oven, about 300 degrees, for 20 minutes until it's nice and golden brown.
How am I doing?
That's good, that's good. Slap it on there.
Good.
Yeah. After the shortcake is cooled, we layer it with the peaches, some sweetened whipped cream, and some homegrown blueberries.
And garnish it with a beautiful piece of mint.
With a little sprig of fresh mint. You know, Alan, when the fresh peaches come in, we sell 1 million of these.
To me, the only thing better than peaches and cream is the addition of Cappy's shortcake. It's a delicious summer treat I look forward to every year. This is a beautiful time of year, particularly up here in New England, where the trees are beginning to shed their leaves, but not so quietly. All of this riotous color is certainly less than sober. The trees put on each of these leaves in the spring, and after shading and protecting us from the summer sun, they bid their glorious farewell, giving the trees a chance to rest before the cycle starts all over again. As they slip off into their winter sleep, I had an opportunity to visit with a man very well acquainted with these noble giants. David Smith is English by birth, but he spent a long time on this side of the pond. He's the former director of horticulture at White Flower Farm in Litchfield, Connecticut.
Alan, coming to New England back in 1954 was really a great challenge for me. To come from England where you don't get these marvelous reds in the fall foliage as you do here, especially the red maples. The New England scenery is just great anyway, with the hills. People come here in their droves just to see the scarlet red maples. First of all, in August, you get those swamp maples, and finally you get the Norway maples, which really are not very showy, but the sugar maples are especially showy.
David, why is New England so unique?
Well, I think it's the diversity of the species in the woodlands here. If you go through the woods, you see so many different species that you may not find in other parts of the country.
So having been gardening in New England since the 50s, have you adopted any favorite Native American trees?
Oh, there's a lot that I really love. The sugar maple is the outstanding one. We have to recognize that, and almost everybody will go for the sugar maple in a big way. And there are many new cultivars that are coming along now that do perfectly well, that they're obtainable from good nursery sources. Things would be rather dull if we had greens the whole year round.
Yes, it would be.
And the colors really tend to start in August, and you get the less and less chlorophyll being produced. And I think the other colors that are there without us seeing them tend to accentuate. and they were
come forward.
forward to the surface, and we see these brilliant colors coming along, some reds and oranges.
With all of this beauty around here, there's certainly plenty of inspiration for planting a tree. And you know, this time of year, it's always a bit staggering, if not poignant for me, to think of all of the autumns a tree will experience. They really are silent witnesses to history. Every season brings its own special beauty, reminders for me of things I want to plant. For instance, in the spring I see daffodils and I want to plant them. But actually the fall is the time to get them in the ground, not the spring. But this time of year, it's the trees that dazzle me. And I'm in luck because it's a great time of year to get them in the ground. One of my favorite families of trees is the maple. Many of them are fast growing. They can have spectacular fall color. And when it comes to the sugar maple, the syrup can make pancakes taste out of this world. The fall display of sugar maples has been made famous by postcards and calendars from New England. If you decide you want to plant one of these, you need to realize it's one of the slowest growing members of the maple family, and they require good drainage. If you're looking for something smaller, you might try one of the oriental cousins. These Japanese maples come in an array of shapes and sizes, both in terms of the form of the plant and the leaf. Probably the fastest growing member of the family is the silver maple. It has beautiful golden yellow leaves in the fall. Because it grows so fast, it can become brittle and break up in high winds, which cuts into its life expectancy. The most popular of them all is the red maple, because it'll grow in so many different places and it's so easy to grow. If you decide to plant one, you might try one of the improved cultivars. You see, the plant breeders have been busy and they've made some wonderful selections. This one is called Red Sunset, and every year it always has beautiful red foliage. There are certain trees that our ancestors made clever use of that I still find fascinating today. A good example of this is the willow. The wide diversity of this huge family of plants is certainly interesting, but what I find particularly intriguing is what lies within the bark. You've probably never thought about what a nagging toothache would have in common with one of these trees. But in the old days, when pioneers were settling this country, they would take a piece of willow bark and put it in and around the source of pain. You see, this bark actually contains the active ingredient found in aspirin, salicylic acid. In fact, the Latin name for willow, salix, is where the name for the acid came from. Our ancestors also recognized another property of willows, that you could actually grow an entirely new tree by taking a stem and sticking it into moist soil. It's the hormones in willows that cause such rapid rooting, and they discovered that these same hormones could help induce the roots of stem cuttings of other plants, such as roses. To harness this power, they made a tonic called willow water. They did it simply by cutting young green stems about the size of a pencil, put them in a jar and filled it with water. Hormones would concentrate in the solution, and then stem cuttings would be dipped in it before rooting. It's just amazing what plants have done and continue to do for us. Today, we've seen trees that entertain and mystify us. Trees that bear the fruits that we enjoy so much. Trees that dazzle us with their beautiful autumn display, as well as trees that produce essential medicines. The way I see it, I'll take a tree any way I can get it, because they're truly one of nature's most magnificent beauties. From the garden, I'm Alan Smith.
this garden I dream of a bed of flowers. Bluebirds sing of the beauty all around us. And every time the sun comes out, I can't help but smile. Oh, no, I can't help but smile.